Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the Destination Debbie Trade Show. My name is Ty at Ty Declare 44. I'm with Cody at Cody Smith TFDR, and we're here for another one. Let's get it.
Okay, let's get it. Bitch, let's get it. Woo!
Cody, we have a pretty unique show coming to the people today. It's not going to be your regular trade show. It's not going to be, hey, this deal versus that deal. We're going to go through an entire league that we're in together. We're going to break down the league itself, some very unique things. So we'll have some conversation there, and then we're going to go through some deals that we specifically pulled off. How you doing, Cody? And you excited for this one?
Hey, we're doing good. Nice 4th of July day as we're recording right now. So having some fun with that. We hop off of this one a little bit later, start sipping on some whiskey, get some burgers, get some beans, be a true American for the rest of the day, honestly. But before we do that, I mean, what better than being a true American than digging through an entire league that you and I have been active on the transactions wire here for the past 2 weeks or so. So yeah, we're going to go through all of those. It's going to be a fun time, a little bit more of a unique trade show, but there's going to be a lot of trades within it, but a little bit more of like, how do we actually break this one down from a full league perspective? So I'm excited about this one, man.
Yeah. And hopefully this is a bit of a taste of what it's like over in the Patreon or over in the Discord. You know, we have these kind of conversations every day about what we're doing in leagues, how we're approaching it. So if you want in on that conversation, patreon.com/ALLGAS. Some of the tools we're using today, the war tool included over at destinationdebbie.com. Cody, I'm going to pull up the war here on the screen, and then I'm going to read through just some of the league settings here just to give a general context. So this is a 24-team, 2-copy, start 12 best ball league. Okay, so 24 teams, 2 copies of every player. You can't have 2 of the same copy. Okay, it's a superflex league. It's best ball. And it's start 12, so pretty deep. There's a 30-man roster, and there's 3 taxi spots as well. It's juiced PPR type scoring. There's like a 1.12 instead of 0.1, so you see that a bit on the wide receiver line there. It's a 2-point tight end premium, a 0.2 point per carry. There's first down bonuses juiced to the wide receivers, and it's a 6-point passing touchdown league. There's a lot of big scores. And I think one of the things that I struggled with last year was really understanding where to prioritize my roster. So as I'm looking at this war graph, Cody, I see a very, very steep quarterback line. I see a relatively flat and not inconsequential, but replaceable tight end line. And then I see running back and wide receivers just kind of taking over as the big time movers, but it's also a very flat and probably exploitable in parts. When you see this graph, what are you thinking?
Right. So I think this is just off the rip. Whenever you're talking about a superflex league, best ball does change a little bit of things, but looking at the top end, I mean, everything's going to start off from the quarterback market. Whenever you're in these superflex leagues, for the most part, we'll see some of those deals go down a little bit later today that we'll dive into further, but quarterback typically, especially at the top, you see is going to be higher than your running back and wide receiver. But to all of those scoring benefits that you laid out, then actually some negative scoring benefits to the quarterback position. If you do take, I think it's like sacks and incompletions. Maybe there's a couple of things in there that actually bring the quarterbacks down overall, and while raising up the running back and wide receiver. So truthfully, you can get by a little bit easier without trying to build at the high end level of the quarterback room. But you do still, like you see, it's a pretty steep drop off compared to the other positions. So you do still need some starters in there. Like we're going to go into my team, and I've got freaking like Kenny Pickett and Desmond Ridder types from last year that I had to try to dig myself out of the hole of. And it was still a competing team, though. Like you said, if you build through those running backs and wide receivers, you actually do have enough. Tight end, when I'm looking at this one, it's mostly just a bodies type thing, right? Whenever you're looking at that flat, you just want enough bodies to be able to hit at that position. Or, if you have a Laporta, Kelsey, one of those is actually, if they do end up hitting at the tight end 1 overall prices, you can do that as well. But a very interesting league, not one that's going to be standard and formatted, but this is why a war tool is extremely beneficial if you do have one of these leagues that's not just your standard run-of-the-mill 12-team start 10 lineup league.
Yeah, for sure. And to almost speak to your point at quarterback, like last year I had Josh Allen and CJ Stroud. Like I was looking in the auction, no one's paying up for quarterback, so I thought I'd push them things, figured I'd push the market, but I just ended up walking away with 2 elite outcome type quarterbacks. I'm like, all right. Even with that, my team was mediocre at best, and then I pulled the parachute and tried to go, down the tank with that thing. But even with those two quarterbacks, like, it wasn't a week over week mover for my team. So I learned pretty quick. It's about construction and about volume at certain positions. So with that being said, at quarterback, when in this league, the way that I want to approach it, ideally, is I can at least have one elite outcome guy. And then, like you said, how many darts do I have to throw to fill in and feel good about it, while thinking about the 30 total roster spots and trying to be economical with it, right? So if I have a couple guys that can be, quarterback 12 to 16 on a regular basis, like, I feel pretty confident in rolling a little slimmer. If I'm rolling the Kenny Pickett's, it's not very comfy, but you're gonna have to assign some spots there, right? And you see that any different at quarterback?
As my mouse just completely freezes up on me there. We're back and we're off of mute, but no, I don't see it much differently here. Apologies for that weird, awkward delay. We're trying to get things going over here, but goodness, no. This is how we play best ball a lot of the time. Like, my specific team that I went into, you went into two elite quarterbacks. I went into this one going, hey, it's a pretty heavy tight end premium league. The quarterbacks, at least the pocket passers, actually looked a little bit better whenever I was first doing the analysis last year, whenever we did the startup. So I was like, hey, this looks like a perfect league for me to go with a Kelsey and Mahomes stack. And obviously both of those guys fell down the board a little bit. Really, all that I was relying on is if they contributed at that wide receiver one, tight end one price, or that production, I probably could have won the league if that had actually happened. But you take a step down, they get 1 year older, and things start to look a little bit dicey. So that's where we move off a little bit. But this is kind of where I've changed a little bit of how I like to build out these best ball teams is, yeah, I kind of want one guy that's probably sitting in that top 12, but then it's just give me the bodies of actually just starts. I don't even really want the Mac Jones, Kenny Pickett types anymore, because they're going to be those guaranteed zeros unless the injury happens in front of them. But even if you can just give me the Derek Carrs and the what used to be like the Ryan Tannehill types, the Carson Wentz types, whenever he was still around and playing, just give me that bottom range of just starters. And they're week over week. If I have 3 or 4 of those guys, I'll just be able to plug in really easily, probably a quarterback 12 to 15 week over week in that second superflex spot.
Correct. When I see 25 quarterbacks being above the replacement line on an annual basis, I'm just going to assume that if I can just have a starting quarterback, I'm going to be okay. I need requisite numbers. If I can climb up and get an advantage, cool. But, I just need requisite numbers. So I agree there. Tight end, I mean, yeah, same thing. I'm just trying to be as economical with my roster spots as I can. Can I get an elite outcome guy and then, 2, 3, maybe 4 others? Sure. I'd love to roster less than 5 tight ends on a team in a league like this, though, just given how low that scoring is. I'd prefer to have between 3 and 4. How are you playing tight end in here?
With Kelsey still on this roster, honestly, that'll probably change here going forward. As I moved off of the stack with Mahomes, the Kelsey part is probably following pretty shortly behind. And I do think that we're just going to go into, if I could get 3 of the Pat Freiermuth, David Njoku, and Evan Ingram or something like that, and if I could just get 3 of those guys that may not have that elite upside like a Kincaid, McBride, even Kelsey or Andrews at this point, just give me 3 guys that will probably sit between that like tight end 8 to tight end 24, and I can roster an entire tight end room that way. And then I can start backfilling at the other positions of running back and wide receiver, which we see here as a replacement level are just going to hit the lineup probably more so than the tight ends. So trying to trim that down as much as possible with just usable bodies each and every week and not really going to like the dart throw type of tight ends, a little bit higher than that for this specific one.
Yeah, agreed. And yeah, you said it great. Like, look at the replaceability levels in the running back and the wide receiver rooms. I mean, when wide receiver 50 plus is above replacement, that just tells me just give me as many bodies as I can. And really, I'm going to want a couple guys that can fall into some certain ranges, but I just want bodies on bodies on bodies. I want to devote as many roster spots to wide receiver as I can, and just give me guys who could have a week. And I'll figure it out on waivers. I'll kind of churn and burn a lot probably from my wide receiver room week over week. But I mean, you can give me an elite outcome guy, sure. I made some moves for some inning eater type guys, so we'll go over those moves. But Cody, I mean, just give me as many wide receiver bodies as I can get.
Yeah, it is the wide receiver bodies, though, especially with what we're seeing from this war graph. Like, you just, if you can build out a roster where you can support probably like 15 16, 17, 18 roster spots just to your wide receiver and just rely on the spike weeks of them. Yeah, that's probably the way that long term I'm going to be looking to build out this room, but we're going to probably have to tear it down a little bit first on my end.
Right. Yeah. And then at running back, I mean, yeah, give me, like, I think what is a start 12. So you have a quarterback, a super flex, a tight end, and 3 wide receivers. So you can start up to, I'm assuming 6 running backs a week. So give me between 6 and 8 running backs, of a certain range, and I'll just ride. Right. Again, I don't need to project week 1 starters here. I just want, maybe even as many like 40 percenters as I can, knowing the receiving bonuses, knowing the PPR of it all. So, I mean, Cody, how are you playing running back here? Man, I mean, is there a certain range where you're just like, nope, can't do it?
Honestly, not with this one. I'm a little bit more flexible with running back in best ball leagues just because, like, I'm okay with taking a couple of zeros because even like the NERB on a 53 in lineup, for me personally, once those guys get in, they do still actually have a tradable market value. So I'm okay with holding some of the backups a little bit more than most people are in best ball leagues, especially once you get to like here, we have basically a 33-man lineup, 30 roster spots, and 3 taxi. It's a little bit deeper than some of the other ones where, like, if you're going into the 25-man rosters like we do have in Royal Rumble or a league like that, now I'm much more stringent with what I can actually put on my roster, and almost everything has to hit. Running back, though, here, a little bit of a deeper lineup. I'm actually okay with putting some of the backups here, even if they don't have a projected role. But if I could, yes, let me get like 8 guys who I know, even if they're not the guaranteed starter, that are just going to get touches week over week. And if they break one, they'll be my running back that hits for that week. I'm okay with building out this way and probably a little bit higher at wide receiver for here.
Yeah. So there's many ways to approach the league. It's one of those leagues that allows for different type of builds. So Cody, do you want to go through your roster now, or do you want to go through some of your deals first?
Now let's go through the roster as it currently sits right now.
Yeah.
As we're sitting right now, we're going to sit with Joe Flacco, Gardner Minshew, Kenny Pickett, Anthony Richardson, and then at the bottom in taxi, we do have Aiden O'Connell sitting there as well. So the way that we're trying to play this one out is basically if I traded for Gardner Minshew earlier in the offseason, not a deal that we'll talk about today, but I basically have a guaranteed lock on the Raiders quarterback room right now. And then I have Anthony Richardson too. 2 backups that are kind of a little bit more high leverage. I don't know if anybody's really going to call Kenny Pickett at this point high leverage backup anymore after you've seen the first 2 years of him play. But I think if you put him into a Philadelphia system that with the new offensive coordinator there as well, he has a little bit of upside. And we saw what Joe Flacco was doing to the league last year over in Cleveland. Pair him up with an Anthony Richardson as well. Now, honestly, I'm just kind of realizing that I did get a little mini insurance policy there as well. That's kind of nice that we're just kind of walking into. It wasn't the plan there, but that's just how the deal shaped out. Running back is where I was saying I'm okay with having the backups, but this running back room, it needs some work, and we've actually traded away a little bit from it already. As it currently sits, Sharbs, Gus Edwards, Jerome Ford, Bucky Irving, my boy, Josh Jacobs, Dylan Lau, Damian Pierce, Kyron Williams. And then at the bottom, I do believe we have a Hole and...
There we go. Sorry.
All good. We got Tank Bigsby and Evan Hole down there. Tank, I mean, goodness, I want to cut him so badly, but he's going to sit on the taxi for now. Evan Hole potentially back up in Indianapolis as well. We got a lot of Colts on this roster, but there's just a little bit too much running back depth here of just random dart throw guys that more so than I would like. So we're probably liquidating off a couple more pieces here to get this as trimmed down as much as possible as we probably go to a little bit of a retool year. I don't need all of these running backs on this roster. So we got some work to do yet. Wide receiver is really where this entire roster fell apart last year as we were trying to push in for a little bit of a win now. Everything started to fall apart. So we've already sent away some of the older pieces to go into the retool. We're now left with Odell Beckham, Kendrick Bourne. I just picked up Jalen Brooks off of waiver wires here this week. Noah Brown, Paris Campbell as well was another waiver wire acquisition. Stephon Diggs, Van Jefferson, Deontay Johnson, McMillan, Michael Thomas, if he can ever sign to a team, maybe gets a little bit of a bump, and then Devontae Walker rounding out the wide receiver room. So it's a mix right now of just waiver wire dart throws, some guys that are probably on the wrong side of 30 years old that are aging out. This is really the room that triggered the entire movement of what I'm doing with this roster right now, because it just was not up to snuff to have any chance of competing for 2024.
Yeah. And I mean, kind of same story at tight end, right? You mentioned Kelsey, but he's 1 foot on the grave, one on a banana peel at this point, right? So he could go one way or the other. And yeah, like I just see a roster where I just want to build in as much flexibility and options as I can, so I can maneuver this thing. If it does end up I start hot, I can maneuver one way or the other. But really, I want to build in some insurance on this thing.
Right. And we're sitting with pick value, and we'll get into the actual pick value of how that's a little bit different in this league,
Right.
probably after we get through your roster, because we're giving auction dollars as pick values instead of actually just picks.
So why don't we stick with yours so it's fresh in mind? Okay, let's go over to not this one. We'll go over to this deal here. And yeah, so in this league, one of the cool wrinkles is that it's a full auction league. So that means rookie auction as well. And those rookie auction dollars also carry over year over year. So the rookie ranges, it's like 800 for 101 all the way down to $8 for 424, right? So there's a wide range of picks. It's also a $250 buy-in league. So if you move any picks, you gotta pay. So getting people to want to move these picks is a little difficult. Let's go to Cody's team here. Cody, you rolled over $273. You came into the draft with 440. So, you were economical. I remember in the draft, you were price enforcing as you could on like the lower end things. And then once it got out of your range, you let it go. So I mean, at this point, we're pretty fresh into the new year. Getting people to move picks, especially in June, can be tough. But I guess, was this July? When was this? Yeah, July 1st. Never mind. But Cody, you gave up that Patrick Mahomes, and one of those guys that you did draft, Ray Davis, and you got back Anthony Richardson in that 2025 first. So we know you weren't looking at Joe Flacco and saying, I like Joe, but how can I do better? But talk to me about, what was it like trying to get a first round draft pick in a league like this, and just talk me through this deal and how you got here.
Yeah, so I think it was beginning of June, maybe a little bit earlier, but this is when I really started to go through leagues, try to evaluate where I was at. And we were looking through that roster that you were just looking through. Obviously, some deals have been made since then, but I was just looking at them like, this has no shot of running it back and trying to compete in 2024. So what do we do to move on from here? Well, the team was really built around this stack of the Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. At this point, that's not going to be able to carry me any further. So let's try to use a little bit of that value that I actually put into the roster originally to try to actually start this retool and focus back to everything else. So probably beginning of June, I actually started sending out deals where I was just Patrick Mahomes, and I went through every single top 10 quarterback in KTC. I just said, I'll send you Patrick Mahomes, and it was just straight up Patrick Mahomes for Jalen Hurts in a first, Patrick Mahomes for Josh Allen in a first. I don't think anybody was going to do it, but it's just process deal that I'm sending out across the entire league to everybody within those that had a top 10 quarterback. And the good thing about this is you do have a copy league, so you can double the amount of deals you're actually sending out and see if anybody were to be able to take that one. Honestly, went pretty radio silent. Most of them just came back with straight up rejections for the most part, and then didn't really have anything that I was doing past that. Log back in last week a little bit at the very end of June, and I actually saw it come into my inbox, and it was the deal of Patrick Mahomes for Anthony Richardson and a first round pick. What I did have to tack back on, though, I was just throwing back a random running back, really. I think it was Jerome Ford that I was throwing back. And it was a little bit, I was like, well, I think we can probably meet in the middle a little bit, and sent back a Ray Davis. And it was a pretty easy dealing. There wasn't any actual conversations that had to happen on this one. It was just a straight up through MFL back and forth. I sent it back with Ray Davis. So, I mean, I paid probably like $10 for in the auction draft. And so if that's all that I have to really throw at it, that would mean equated out to probably like a 4th round pick that I'm really throwing in here back. And I'm able to start the retool, start to gather up some more auction dollars, because last year I didn't have enough to really be a player in the auction. I did have a little bit of liquidation that I got at the end of the year, but I need a lot more going forward, and I need a lot more high valued assets. I can't go into another auction going forward sitting here and just playing, with the Jalen McMillans, the Devontae Walkers, and the Ray Davises of the world. I'm going to need some actually heavy hitters, or I'm going to need enough auction dollars to trade for a heavy hitter in the actual league somewhere else. And so this was the start of it. It was just tearing off of Patrick Mahomes. in the league where quarterback is a little bit more flat, I was definitely willing to do that within the top 10 of quarterbacks. And I like the upside of Anthony Richardson right now. So yeah, give me the first on top of it and I'll take this one.
Yeah. Week over week, if you told me Anthony Richardson outscored Patrick Mahomes, I'm not going to be shocked, right? It's just Mahomes has done it, and you can see how Mahomes can maybe do it in a more sustainable way, right? So I get it. I mean, again, I have a lot of Chiefs gear on today, even my cup matches. I mean, yeah, so I am a Chiefs fan, but I mean, I'm not blind to the fact that we're talking fantasy. And like I said, Anthony Richardson, I think he's that guy, and he's in a league that rewards PPC, like points per carry, and he gets a 0.2 point per carry as well. So it's not a small one. I think you do have to really respect I'll say the word again, sustainability that the rushing can bring on a week-to-week basis. So long-term outcome, short-term, week-to-week stuff, like I don't see much of a difference between Anthony Richardson and Patrick Mahomes besides what I know that their market should demand. A first-round pick, like I said, I agree. You probably have to kick something back. If I'm supersonic, like I'm probably seeing that you have Kelsey as well, and I might try to throw a counter back with Kelsey. Like that's kind of like extracurricular. You don't have to do it if you're worried about Kelsey falling off the cliff. But I mean, Cody, if you took away that Jerome Ford and it was Travis Kelsey, I'm sure there would have been a deal that you would have found that would have worked out there.
Yeah, there was potentially something there. The first time I was going through the league, it was with the idea of trying to, hey, let's package this thing up because somebody else could probably use the stack. I mean, it's still a high leverage, high volume stack. I know it didn't work out exactly last year, but they could easily still be in the top 3 at their position each. And that's a stack that could win you a league going forward. And you've got at least probably another 2 years of Travis Kelsey who's saying that he's going to go until the tires fall off on him. Originally, it was probably trying to move both of them in the same deal, but it was just so much easier to do this, like send out the spam deals and send out just clean cut quarterback. If this hadn't come back into the inbox, I probably would have had to go to that and do a little bit more work to really do this. But whenever I can do it this easily, I can find somebody else who's eventually going to take Travis Kelsey or just come back to Supersonic here later in the year once we get a little bit closer to the season again and do another deal that probably does something similar as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned something there, and I've seen you do it in much of our multi-copy leagues, is you can send out almost twice as many offers, usually, if a deal makes sense, especially if you're going for what you're calling like the process deals, right? Those let me put in your inbox. You can say no, that's fine, but here's what I'm willing to do, and I'm showing that I'm interested. You can go and really have a big span of deals that you can throw out. And if you're in these leagues where you can get a response, you can get a counter, a lot of things can happen and you can be pretty creative and approach it different ways. But I agree. You're not sending Mahomes and Kelsey to all your league mates as a big spam because it's going to take a certain team that's going to want that. And you're going to want to start with what you are willing to really take if this is the bottom line and then work your way backwards, right? You're not in those multi-process deals. You're going to stick with the process, but you're not going to send like your AA plus offer. You know what I mean?
It also takes me probably like 3 hours to construct all of those in a way that I would want to return it versus I can go through pretty easily and just say, hey, if I can just get a quarterback and a first for Mahomes, I can do that. I can send out the deals in 5 minutes across the entire league and we're done. And it's pretty clear cut. And that's honestly probably 90% of the deals that I send out, even in single copy leagues. It's just like, hey, I'm just going to spam this thing across. We're just going to rely fully on process for about everything we do. That's probably 90% of the way I play, at least in the trade market.
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to keep an eye on going forward is like what managers are moving those first. What teams have already paid a buy-in for moving another pick? Does that make them more willing to move more of their picks? So I do want to track a little more year over year, month over month, whatever, how teams are moving these picks and approaching these picks. Did you have any intel going into this at all that Supersonic wanted to move their pick?
Nothing. Yeah. Fully on just spam out deals. I don't know if he's moved anything or paid in any future years, anything like that. It was truthfully just going through the quarterback list and going down the board. But I do think it is a thing going into the future. I mean, if I want to continue to liquidate, I should probably look at people. If I'm only looking to pick up extra seconds and thirds, I should probably look at people first who've already paid in that $250 because like we've mentioned before, it's hard for some people to stomach that whenever it's just I'm paying $250 to just acquire Adam Thielen for a third. Why would I do that right now? That's not really worth it. That's not the deal that's going to push me over the edge to pay an extra $150 right now. it does actually create a little bit of a barrier, even though it's fun playing in these high stakes leagues. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a pain too.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why, again, like I don't need to get first in a format like this, right? You can approach it with volume. You could get every third round pick, every fourth round pick, and walk into the draft with almost as much money as some of the big stacks. That's more or less what I did. And we can kind of get into my team here in a little bit, but you mentioned a deal, and this is kind of more how I was approaching getting picks here and accruing value is scooping up those thirds and fourths. So our man Ben, you made a trade with Ben, and you gave up Tyler Lockett and Adam Thielen. So again, just what we were talking about, you had a lot of those kind of options, right? A little long in the tooth. You sent those away. You got back Tyler Higbee, the third, the fourth from Ben Mason. So Cody, talk me through this one.
Yeah, this is a pretty easy one. Obviously, I'd probably rather take a third for each of Tyler Lockett and Adam Thielen. But at this point, whenever I've got those and we went through the roster, I've still got a couple of other guys who are probably on the wrong side of 30 who are not really top end level producers anymore. And if I'm going into a retool year where I don't really expect to compete, these guys just need to go. Like for whatever I can get back. This one, I think Ben had maybe originally sent it to me, or I had maybe sent it as 2/3 going into the future. But I settled on the third and the fourth here just to liquidate out. Probably, like I said, would have rather gotten the third for each of them. But I got Tyler Higbee back. You may be thinking, well, Tyler Higbee's on an injury year and he's older as well. You probably don't need to be doing that for your retool year. But I do like to actually track where we do have IR leagues, and this is one of those. So we can actually throw him into that IR. And we'll stash him there as soon as the actual injury reports get out, because he will be on IR for half or not more of the season going into 2024. It's kind of like an extra roster spot for me that I can just take the long-term upside play on Higbee ever returning to relevance, kind of like what I've done with Zach Ertz over the past couple of years in a lot of leagues. That I've got a lot of Zach Ertz around there, and he's coming back and still producing and playing, it seems like, and probably is a tight end one for the Washington Commanders right now. So kind of the same line of thinking with what I'm doing there. But the biggest thing here was just to get both of them off in one clean swoop. And like I just mentioned, it's hard sometimes to get people to pay $250 for the types of Adam Thielen and Tyler Lockett. And I was able to get both of them off here. Third and fourth, a little bit lower than what I'd like. Throwing to Tyler Higbee to make up the difference, though. Pretty clean cut.
That's one of those, just get the deal done, move your team forward. You said, you started doing your review. You figured out kind of what you want to do. You figured out some of the moves you need to make. You're not going to hold up a deal over a third, right? You're not going to sit there, well, I don't want Tyler Higbee, so I'm not going to take this. You just, okay, so let's make it work. Does this move my team forward? Yep, sure. It's not going to, I don't even know how this looks on a trade calculator. I'm assuming not great, but the trade calculator will never, ever capture the depth of a league like this and where your team is in the scope of all that.
Right. And I mean, you're throwing just an auction rookie draft into it as well. Another thing, you're talking about a free roster spot that I can eventually get once we get to the season of Tyler Higbee. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. I mean, obviously Ben's still in competition for he's pushing in still, trying to re-roll it for another year, see if he can take the league down. Doesn't make me stoked to have his picks here that are probably going to be towards the back end. If it does end up being only like $28 of auction dollars, yeah, I probably lost the deal in the grand scheme of things. But there's also the added value of I just picked up, like I was talking about earlier, whenever we were going through the roster, I picked up the Paris Campbell. I picked up Jalen Brooks if he can be the wide receiver 3 in Dallas. I just get the extra roster spots back as well, and that holds about as much value as getting them off too.
Yeah. So, more likely than not, hey, like if that's like 320, that's still what, $100, right? You walked in with a little over 400 last year. So if you make a couple deals like that, even if they're late, it could work out for you pretty well. So I like it from where you're going. I like it from Ben's perspective because I know what his team's trying to do. So yeah, get the deal done. I mean, Cody, it was nice seeing you work, and it was nice that I wasn't the only one, doing work. But yeah, so I'll go over my team now. So again, my team, I pulled the ripcord pretty early into the season last year, sold off a lot of my Ezekiel Elliott's and things like that, in season, scooping up any fourth, any value I can, just knowing that I can maybe have my advantage in the rookie auction year one. Friend of the show, Brett, he had $5,500 already stocked up, right? GRT, $5,500, something like that. The rest of the league had about $1,400, and I made a couple moves in the offseason as well to grow my advantage, but I ended up with about $2,800 going into the rookie auction. So I had double what most of the other league mates had, and I was within striking distance of like the top four. So going into that draft, I wanted to try to roll over some auction dollars, I want to do some things, but really just want to fill out with as many movable, dynasty bean type options as I could. And you're going to notice a theme in the deals that I throw away of what I'm sending. But on my team, Josh Allen and CJ Stroud, I tried to send a lot of the deals that Cody talked about, but wasn't getting any real traction there. So I thought I'll just stick with that. I had Aaron Rodgers as well, who I got in a deal at one point, just kind of throw in once his Achilles was popped. And then Michael Penix Jr. is one of the guys that I brought over. So again, knowing we have a taxi squad on a best ball roster, let me plop him on there. Perfect. Running back was a room where I really needed to just address and get some kind of bodies in there because it was pretty gross and pretty rookie dependent. So I ended up now having Tyler Algier, Blake Corum, J.K. Dobbins, Alvin Kamara, Jaleel McLaughlin, Jalen Warren, and Jalen Wright. I wanted to make sure I had as many Jalen's or Jaleels as I could, really any J names. So that was my real goal here. I also have Audric Estime in the taxi squad. So similar kind of to you, Cody, right? I'm okay taking a couple zeros. I need guys in certain ranges, but I need to make a move to get a guy like an Alvin Kamara in a room like this that needs some more reliability, and then I can hopefully rely on a running back 2 week from someone else. But like I mentioned, I was building around the wide receiver room, and I want as many wide receivers as I can get. And a lot of my wide receiver room was rookies who I have no clue what their role is going to be. And I had some long in the tooth guys as well who I had some troubles moving. So I wanted to try and pivot around and see what I could do. So at wide receiver, I ended up with Keenan Allen, Javon Baker, Tyler Boyd, Malachi Corley, Tank Dell, Greg Dortch, Jalen Hyatt, Tyler Lockett, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, Rondale Moore, Jalen Polk, Rashid Shaheed, Khalil Shakir, Devontae Walker, Mike Williams, and Michael Wilson. So you can see there's a certain range of guys that I want, and I'm okay taking on some of the hashtag crust lust on a build like this, where I'm approaching with such volume that I'm just betting that I'm going to find those spike weeks and I'm going to have enough guys that I don't need to worry so much about having the Justin Jeffersons of the world. I don't need that. I'm just going to bet that my volume is going to fill that out and I'll have a high enough relative floor of scoring in my wide receiver room that I'll get by. And then at tight end, I was a little bit overweight at tight end. I had Bowers, Schultz, I had Jake Ferguson and a couple other bodies there. So knowing what we were talking about with the tight end war, right? Because given how low relative to the other positions it was scoring, I wanted to prioritize elsewhere and I wanted to slim out at tight end. I paid up a good number for Brock Bowers in the draft. That was one of my goals, is to walk away with someone like a Bowers in a 2.0 tight end premium. So at this point, I have the 3. I'll probably add a 4th at some point, but it's going to be probably that dart throw plus range. So, I mean, Cody, looking at the roster, do you agree with how I was looking at it?
Yeah, I love where your team is at a lot more than I love where my team is at. My team kind of feels like where you started off at the beginning of last year, and you feel like it feels like from what you've done is you've gotten to a pretty good roster construction here, and you're actually looking to, I don't know what your overall goal with this thing is, but I think you could turn this into a one year retool and trying to compete this year with what you've currently got. I think that's why you've still got that Alvin Kamara. You're still headlined by Keenan Allen. You've got some names here that could still produce at the high levels, and you've got enough backfield depth. I mean, truthfully, you're 30 deep here of guys that I'm not even considering cutting. And in most leagues, that's hard to do in a best ball roster like this. So I actually really like where this team is at. You've got enough of the upstart guys at the rookie spots. If some of those guys hit, you might be able to flip some of them off and get a little bit more production, some guaranteed if you do really want to make a push. But I like where this thing is sitting at. And I kind of agree that if you were able to build this type of a roster in an offseason, I don't think you really needed to move off the Josh Allen, CJ Stroud, because you were able to get enough of the depth and actual pieces that are going to help you push in for this retool and then win now build. I actually like it still being headlined by them. And if it does come to something, then you could maybe move one of them in the season. But you still hold those chips right now. And those are still, regardless of what the quarterback market is, those are still good chips to have.
Yeah. It's a league where I know some of my managers that I play against are going to be forever, not forever rebuilding, but forever wanting the youth. So I know I'm not going to out tank those guys. I know there's teams that have already chosen are still going in the tank direction because they don't think their team is there. I don't really want to, try to bet against those guys, but I have Josh Allen and CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson, and I'm constructed fairly well, and I can probably add running back in season. So I was sitting there, I was like, I might as well push in because this is a team that is, I think if I do it right, I think I can do it. Am I going to have to take some quote unquote value loss, especially on some of these rookie names to make it happen? Yeah. But if I can make it work, I'm okay with it. So let's get into, I guess, some of the deals that I made here, Cody, because I made, you're going to see here date wise, really in close order to each other, all these deals. I did the same thing that you did. I took a look at my leagues in June, right? Took a quick look around. Where am I at? What do I want to do? Underdog, scratch that itch for a good bit. If you're still an underdog or you're not on Underdog yet, code ALLGAS, get your special pick and up to 250 first time deposit bonus. But I already used that, so I was in there. I was like, okay, I need to start focusing on my dynasty leagues again. So I went back to some of the guys that I know I can get deals done with as well, and I did the same thing you did. Sent out a flurry of offers, a lot of same offers to guys that have the same people of things that I would do that worked. I would either get accepted or I would get a counter and we'd figure something out. So my first one here is with Nick Pick 6. Nick and I had made some deals in the past, including exchanging Terry McLaurin and Jake Ferguson at one point. But in this deal, I gave up Kamani Vidal and Jake Ferguson, and I got back Keenan Allen and Terry McLaurin. So in this deal, again, in that running back room, I wanted to move away from the Kamani Vidal types, where if I know that I can probably make some moves to get into veterans for a cheaper price than what I can sell Vidal. And if I can move that into just another wide receiver that I can trust or another wide receiver body that I can throw into that room, I'm cool with it. And at tight end, I want to try and slim out a little bit. So if I can move that Jake Ferguson and again, get into a certain range of wide receiver, that really makes me feel more free in what I was doing. So Cody, when you saw this, Keenan Allen, McLaurin for Kamani and Ferguson, what'd you think?
Ooh, I mean, I know people like the Vidal right now. There's a lot of hype around Kamani, but still, he's a late round running back, and I would still bet that it's Gus Edwards. And if J.K. Dobbins has any recovery ability, I think they could both be playing above him. So I'm cautious on Vidal, but I certainly wouldn't value him as much in the grand scheme of this thing. I think it's just the evaluation of what Jake Ferguson is in the 2 tight end premium league. But like we saw from the War Graph, I mean, you're heavily inclined to move off of them. And if you can move into 2 producing wide receivers here, I actually really like where this one comes out for you. Obviously, I mean, if Vidal hits to the way that some people are talking about, you might end up losing it. But those are 2 pieces in Keenan Allen and Terry McLaurin that I think we both like for the push in that you're doing right here. This one makes sense directionally for you, I think. And yeah, I'd be pretty stoked to get Keenan Allen and Terry McLaurin out of basically Jake Ferguson as I evaluate it.
Yeah, and the floor could fall out on Keenan Allen and Terry McLaurin for sure. But again, the way that I'm trying to build that out, I think it has some year-over-year flexibility and some insurance built into it just from the pure volume of it all. So I'm not overly worried about that. If I can get the points now, construct the way I want to now, I'm okay with it. So I was good making that deal. And then our man Koopa, shouts out to Koopa. Really, really enjoy seeing Koopa grow and just everything as a content creator, dynasty manager, all that. So really like Koopa, and Koopa's always one I can get a deal done with. So I don't know. I sent Koopa some bullshit offer. Koopa sent me back Jaleel for Burton. I countered back with this deal. So I sent away Will Shipley and Jermaine Burton, and I got back Jaleel McLaughlin and Tyler Boyd. I mean, it's no secret that Jermaine Burton slipped in the draft for things outside of his profile. Right. And if he's not a knucklehead, like he could find a way to be a producer possibly early. And I like Burton. I like the flash. I have Burton on a lot of teams, especially the ones that I have Burrow on. Will Shipley, I just feel he falls in that Kamani Vidal range, but has a little less luster on his name. Right. So again, I had too many of guys like that. So I wanted to move away from those types. Moving into a Jaleel McLaughlin, who I'm definitely biased on Jaleel, but I think he has a good chance of being the leading volume running back out of that offense, at least early. And I know when he gets the ball, he's been efficient based on, I guess, the history we've seen. History could change, but I bet Jaleel's going to be efficient. And in this scoring format, I felt really good about taking that bet, the PPC, the receiving bonuses for first down, all the math lined up where I want to be heavier on Jaleel than I would be in other leagues here. So I wasn't giving up Burton for Jaleel though, and I figured, how can I make this work? Tyler Boyd feels like a very low cost option where, again, he's just another name on the board for me at wide receiver. He's just another guy in that range. I don't need the beans. I just need the body, right? So in this deal, I'm sure that there's going to be people think I would never send away Jermaine Burton and Will Shipley for that. But does that at least make some sense for you how I did that or why I did that, Cody?
Yeah, I think the logic gets there, but I do think if people are looking at it just in a general dynasty market evaluation, people are going to say, I'd rather have the upside of Will Shipley over Jaleel, and I'd rather have the upside of Burton over Boyd. So I think whenever you're looking at this one from the outside perspective of just like general context of what the dynasty market is saying right now, I do think you probably took the loss on this one, but whenever you're going through the narrative basis of, I mean, we're looking through all of these trades here, and you obviously had a lot more rookies and younger players than you originally had on that roster that we looked at. So you needed to de-risk yourself off of some of those. So doing deals like this, even if you don't have as much upside, you're still getting guys that are probably going to be solid weekly possibilities to hit your lineup each and every week. So I like that. I'm a little bit lower on Burton than most people are. I don't think it was just his, knuckleheadedness, the production profile. I'm sitting with an A&M flag above me. 25% of all of his production came in that one game against a defensive backfield that should not play on a college football field. Okay. I was at that game and it was disgusting. It was about 180 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. His production profile doesn't look all that great if you reduce the A&M game. So I'm a little bit lower on him, but that's just personal bias here. If we go back to just market value though, I think you probably could have gotten something else done. If you'd waited a little bit longer here, you might've been able to extract a little bit more value, but it's the narrative thing, right? Of like, whenever the deal's in your inbox, and especially in a league that, there's a good amount of trading in here, but you don't know when that deal might come back up, and it might not ever come back up that you could do something like this. So if it's there and you're good with it, I'm more okay with it than I think most people would be, but I do understand probably if you just pulled 100 people, 90 people are probably going to take the other side than what you got here.
I agree. That's definitely one that I could have waited on and probably found another deal for Burton and Shipley. But like we were saying, there's certain teams that are already in certain directions. I know teams that aren't going to want Burton and Shipley just on a baseline because they're probably sitting in a way that I am. And again, the way that my team is constructed, the way that I was approaching the league, if I can just take some of that value from Burton, but move into another range and actually fill a need on my team, even if that need is a bet on my end of I'm taking a bet that it's going to be returned more value than what it would at a baseline trade value. Sure. If I'm looking pure flippability and tradability, yeah, I took a massive L, I think, moving Burton and Shipley for Jaleel and Boyd. But this is one of those ones where I kind of had to swallow it and just say, you can kind of see I was trying to do something and do things in volume as well. I want to strike and strike hard right now. So I was really willing to get a deal done. And yeah, Koopa and I got one done. So good work, Koopa. You got me on the value on this one. But yeah, hopefully this one actually works out for my construction. And then I made another deal. Again, moving out of a certain range of wide receiver, getting bodies back, trying to load off my tight ends and move some of these things and move into things that I actually help my team. So I gave up Marvin Mims, JT Sanders, my 2025 first round pick, and my 2025 third round pick. I got back Alvin Kamara, Tyler Lockett, and DJ Moore. Now, did I want to move my first in this league? No. Did I want to pay $250 to do so? Absolutely not. But if I'm making these moves on my team and I'm betting that having the players that I have, I'm not going to be able to tank at this point. So I might as well push in if I can find a deal that really does make sense for me. Moving off of Marvin Mims, JT Sanders, opening up those roster spots for other things, there's inherent value in that alone. Trust me, I've tried to move Mims and like I haven't really tried to move Sanders too much because we just drafted him. But again, on my team, I don't need a JT Sanders range guy. I can figure that out with something else. Mims, again, I was trying to get rid of Mims for a while. The third round pick, I'd love to have that in my back pocket going into season, but if I can get a deal done now, I'm not going to say I'm going to hold this up over a third. And then, yeah, so I moved out of all that and I moved into some production now. So I got Alvin Kamara and Tyler Lockett. So looking there, you mentioned a third for Lockett. I'm pretty much there with you, right? You want Lockett. He's been a producer. Give me a third, sure. So I think we can cross off Lockett in the third. Alvin Kamara, I still feel good about Alvin Kamara. I think last year was tough, but I think he would have a good year coming up this year. At least that's my hope, and that's what my underdog portfolio says. But I mean, Cody, if we're looking at Alvin Kamara, Marvin Mims, and JT Sanders, is that about what we're looking at in a 2.0 tight end premium? You know, Mims and Sanders, would that get Kamara off you?
Well, I first got to go back as we were looking it up. I mean, Alvin Kamara, he was the RB3 in points per game at the running back position in this league last year. So I don't even know if we're saying that it was a rough year. If you could even just replicate what we did, that's a beautiful thing. So I'm going to go back into, let's go back to the weeks before that you've seen on this show. I'm going to go back to just pure how I would break it down, how I would evaluate this one if I were to do it. And so I'm going to go DJ Moore for the first and the third is where I'm going to cross that one off. JT Sanders, I think, could swap pretty easily for the Alvin Kamara. You got Marvin Mims and Tyler Lockett. I mean, you've been saying that you can't move him for anything, and I don't disagree with that consensus from a lot of people. So you're getting three producing assets that you want to go into here. DJ Moore is a little bit interesting just because of what's sitting there in Chicago with Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen, and you have Keenan Allen on the same team, I believe now, with the DJ Moore. So maybe there's something if you wanted to diversify that back a little bit in the future, but you get three really good producing assets here. Tyler Lockett's on the little bit of fringe side of that, I guess, as I think he's the one who had really the down year here last year, and see if he can bounce back with this new Seahawks offense. But you get three producing pieces. Yeah, you don't want to move your first and the third, but when you can get into the range of assets like DJ Moore, Alvin Kamara for a push into a win now, yeah, I think the value is okay here, but I like basically for your direction and where you're moving, I like each side that you got of the pieces that I'm putting together here.
Yeah, and if I'm telling you I want to win right now, like DJ Moore is not the first name that comes to my mind whatsoever, right? But I just think Moore has a certain range that he can fall into that I'm okay making that bet, even if there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. And I think at a first and a third, like I'm willing to make that bet at that price. Again, yeah, having Keenan Allen, building a little bit of correlation into that. I don't mind that. You know, a little Seattle, Chicago stat. Hey, here we go. You know, like already thinking out to week 17. But yeah, just looking at where my team was at and the assets I could move, I was okay to give up some of that pick leverage, give up some of the younger names, and move into three things that I can actually feel good about. And again, it's a snowball effect of all of these deals, but you can see like I'm willing to move off of the upside on the rookies and the young guys if it means that I can hit my requisite numbers at certain positions. And I think I've accomplished that on those three trades. But by doing that, I was over roster limits. Cody, I had 31 players. I had sent out some deals, didn't really get anything back. And then I got this counter. So I gave up Roschon Johnson and Jaden Reed, and I got back Tank Dell. Now, some of my previous trades, again, I was trying to trade into like the inning eater type wide receiver range and try to liquidate out of that hopeful wide receiver range. Trying to get more bottom barrel or top barrel, but not needing to go too high on the wide receiver ladder. I didn't really feel like I needed to add another wide receiver and climb again. But when you're up against roster limits, it's either you make a small cut and just do something to get by. But I was like, can I upgrade anywhere? Can I feel better about any of these bets? So I had that Jaden Reed. I had tried to move Reed before, but no one really wanted to put that oomph behind Jaden Reed. So I was like, okay, Jaden Reed. And I had Roschon Johnson. Again, another guy just in that running back range where, I don't know, I have too many of these types. So I'm willing to move Roschon. And I basically did that to get into another stack there with CJ Stroud. I already had Dalton Schultz. Give me the Tank Dell. I think Tank Dell has a higher range of outcomes than Jaden Reed. I think they both fall into similarly busy offenses. Cody, you're a Houston Texans fan. Up against roster limits, played a factor in here and me just needing to get a deal done. But how do you feel about Tank Dell for Jaden Reed and Roschon Johnson?
Yeah, personally, I don't have as much of a separation between Jaden Reed and Tank Dell. But the good thing is I don't value Roshan Johnson as anything more than a third running back and offense that's probably not going to be extremely high powered on the running back side of things. It's probably going to work a little bit more through the wide receiver side of things. So, I mean, it's going to be Swift and it's going to be Khalil Herbert there. Roshan Johnson is almost a special teams player, and he's a gadget player in this offense in the running back room as it currently sits right now. I was just never a fan of Roshan. So, while I do have Dell higher than Reed, the gap isn't that much, but also Roshan doesn't really factor in much more than a back end third, maybe a fourth round pick for me personally. Where I do like this, though, even if I'm not the biggest Tank Dell fan, I think he could easily be the third wide receiver in this offense, but you're stacking him up with a CJ Stroud, you're stacking him up with a Dalton Schultz, and if you want to make that bet and you already have a reason that you need to make a 2-for-1 type of deal here, whatever the upgrade that you can get, and if you personally think that Jaden Reed is higher than Tank Dell, like, I don't know why you wouldn't make this type of a deal.
Yeah, that pretty much nails it. Like, I do think that if I had, gun to my head, yeah, give me Tank Dell over Jaden Reed. I do think that it's closer in reality than what, it says. And again, we've looked at this war graph, right? Like, at a certain range of wide receiver, where is it here? Yeah, at a certain range of wide receiver, like, it's pretty flat, and week over week, good luck choosing which one is going to be what. But I had motivation to send something away. Roshan Johnson definitely wasn't going to change that. We talk about how hard it is to move picks in this league. No one's paying $250 to get on Roshan Johnson, so the market's already pretty limited there. So I'll happily throw in a Roshan Johnson if I can just move in. And my why, sure, let me stack up a CJ Stroud, take a perceived tier up at wide receiver. But yeah, and both sides walk away happy. Best ball 2-for-1, ideal. So, Cody, looking at the totality of everything, I mean, is there a benefit in getting deals done in a cascade effect like this? Is there a benefit in taking your time and trying to extract every little thing out of a deal? How do you feel?
Yeah, I'm probably going to move a little bit slower just over the course of everything, unless I can just hit on a bunch of spam deals in a row. Like, I will fully admit that probably 90% of my deals are about 85% of actual market value, and then I'm expecting the counter to come back and hit me at about 100%. But if you don't get those counters in, I'm not one that's going to really reach out to you and go, like, hit you up in the DMs and be like, hey, can we work this one out? Like, I think you probably put in, I don't know specifically, but it looks like you put in a pretty good amount of time in those 2 days to actually work with people to really get to these deals. But I don't typically operate that way, but in this specific case, it was very much worth it for you, because I think even just I think we went through, and you're not exactly like winning every deal by a landslide, but what all of this does is to get to a plan. You had a roster construct in mind, and you had pieces and styles of players that you wanted to move off of and others that you wanted to move into. And in the totality of it, you look at the roster right now, and it looks like you've done a damn bang up job of getting to that point now where this roster looks ready to roll. And you can look at it before we get to the season, but truthfully, if you just rolled in with it as is, I think it's in a very good spot now. So you've spent a good, 48, 72 hours, whatever it was. But now you've gotten to a point where you can kind of just sit back, watch this thing roll into the season, watch training camp play out. If something pops up, you can take advantage of it. But this league that you just spent a little bit of time into a couple days is now in a perfect spot for where you want to go to going into the season.
Yeah, for sure. You said it perfectly, Cody. No notes. Good work. Anything else in the league? Any last takeaways? Anything on your team? What you're trying to do? A PSA to your league mates on what to send you to move forward here. How are you feeling? And again, thanks for coming on 2 weeks in a row. I'm putting you to work, but I appreciate you.
We have a fun time doing it. The only thing other we'd be doing is just doing projections right now. So we'll be running through those. We'll be putting those out as well here in the future. So glad you had me on to give a little bit of a PSA for that. Anybody in the league, obviously, if a player's on the wrong side of 30 and on my roster, by all means, come and get it. It is open season hunting game over there. So I'm going to be into a little bit of a retool year. I don't really have any aspirations or lofty ideas of trying to compete this year. I'm trying to build out that wide receiver room because it is lacking compared to, if you compare our 2 wide receiver rooms back to back, it's not really a competition right now. I'm sitting here with Stephon Diggs headlining me along with Deontay Johnson, and then we go to absolute just dart throws there. So I like where your team's at. Hopefully you can take this one down as I go into a little bit of a retool year, and then we'll trade places, back and forth. We'll just keep taking down this 2014 $250 league, and we can just, if we do that, we can pay for fantasy leagues for the rest of our lifetimes if we just keep going back and forth on this one.
Yeah, financially winning leagues regularly, that's a good move. So I might try that, Cody. That's a good one. No,
it's a pretty pro strategy. I don't know if anybody out there's thought of it, but winning leagues does pay for future leagues and more.
You heard it here first. If you want more incredible takes like this, you can follow Cody at Cody Smith TFDR on X. Hit us up over in the Discord, patreon.com/allgas. We will chat this stuff out any hour of the day. I swear. Again, Underdog, code ALLGAS, get that first time deposit bonus and first pick or special pick up to $250 with that first time deposit bonus. And keep up with Destination Devi at Destination Devi on X and destinationdevi.com for all articles, tools, all that good stuff. Cody, thank you so much again. Everyone, I hope you found this actionable, entertaining, somewhere in between. Hit the like, hit subscribe. We'll be back again next week with something a little different, maybe just a regular old trade show. Who knows? We out of this thing. Peace.